Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from anthonymorganti.com. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about a very reasonably priced flash that works great. It's the Aperlite YH-400 flash. Now, this is it here, and I have to say I was pleasantly surprised at the build quality. It's really strong plastic, very well made. The controls are very firm and sure, excellently done, very well done. Now, to give you some idea of the size, right here in my right hand is a Nikon SB910 flash. This is the top of the line Nikon flash, and you can see that the Aperlite YH-400 is just about identical in size. Now, this Nikon flash runs over $500. The Aperlite is under $50. So it's really, as I mentioned, reasonably priced, and it does a really nice job. Like the Nikon, the head itself will tilt 90 degrees on the vertical, so you could bounce the light off the ceiling, stuff like that. It also will twist 270 degrees on the horizontal, and that is identical to the Nikon. Also, it has a little diffuser that will pop out here that it folds over the lens, or the flash of the lens, and or the lens of the flash, I should say. And it has this little bounce card that comes with it too. And again, that is just exactly the same on the Nikon. Now, how is it different than the Nikon? Well, this flash is a manual flash. It does not have TTL. TTL is through the lens, and what that means is your camera and your flash communicate to one another to properly illuminate the scene. Because of that, if you have a TTL flash, it'll only work with the manufacturer camera that it's made for. So you need a Canon flash on a Canon, you need a Nikon flash on a Nikon. I cannot take this Nikon flash and put it on a Canon and get TTL performance from it. It just won't work. So in that case, that won't work. Now in this case, this flash will work with both Canon and Nikon because it's a manual flash. Also, I've tested it on my Fujifilm cameras, and it works on my Fujifilm great too. So it'll work on Canon, Nikon, Fujifilm, and probably a lot of others too, because as I mentioned, it's a manual flash. Well, what does manual mean? Well, you have to set the flash power to properly illuminate the scene, and that might sound difficult, but it really isn't. So why don't I turn it on, and right away you could hear a motor sound, and that it has a zoom head, and the zoom head will zoom in from 24 millimeters out to 105 millimeters, and it does that so it will properly illuminate the scene. So if you're using a wide angle lens, the angle light that comes out of this will be enough to illuminate the entire scene. It's easy to change anything. There's like a zoom button right here. You press that zoom button, then you would use these up and down arrow keys here to zoom in and out. So you could do that very, very quickly, and then hit the zoom key or hit the set key when you're done. Either or will do the same thing. It has a pilot button, so you could test flash by hitting that. Curiously, you could also hit the ready light and it will test flash. So either of those, their use is a bit redundant. Now, you see there's a mode button here. There are 3 modes. The main one, as I mentioned, being manual. And if you want to change the power on the flash, right now you could see it's 1/128th of a power. You would use the up arrow key to give it more power, and it goes in 1/3 stop increments. So you could just keep dialing it up, and you can see this bar goes across again to give you an idea of how much power you dialed in. The other 2 modes I'll get to in a minute, but as far as manual, you might be wondering, how do you know how to set the flash? Well, it's relatively easy. If you have a flash meter, of course, it's really easy. You would just put the flash meter in the scene. If you have a model, ask her to hold it under her chin or his chin, and then you would hit the pilot button to test fire the flash. The flash meter then will tell you what aperture to set your camera at. Now, if you don't have a flash meter, you could use what they call the guide number. And what the guide number is let me turn it off for a second to preserve battery because I'm like that. The guide number is kind of this number that's just with the flash. Let me set that down for a minute because I'm getting tired of holding it. And in this case with the Aperlite, the guide number is 58. And that might sound, for those of you that know what guide numbers are, that might sound ridiculously high. And that's because there's different factors that influence the guide number. For instance, the ISO of your camera. If your ISO is higher, your guide number will go up. So in this case, Aperlite rates it at 58 with an ISO of 100. Now, the next factor is how much you have that zoom head of the flash zoomed in or out. The more you have it zoomed in, the higher will be your guide number. So in this case, they rated at 58 at 105 millimeters, which is the maximum that head zooms in. Now, conversely, if you look at a Nikon SB910, which is the top of the line, again, Nikon flash, you'll look on the box and it will say it has a guide number of 34. And you'll say, well, this is less powerful than this. Well, it isn't. They're rating it at ISO 100, but with the zoom head zoomed into 35. So you got to remember how you compare a guide number. You have to know what the ISO is they're using and what they have their head zoomed into. Now, as I mentioned, this is 58 at 105. At 35, like the Nikon, where the Nikon is a guide number of 34, when this is set to 35 on the zoom head, it is a 31 guide number. So it is a little less powerful than the Nikon. So what does that guide number mean? Well, the guide number is a really easy way for you to figure out what aperture to use on your camera. Let's just, for the sake of argument, say that you have the flash set at, let's say, a certain zoom head that gives you a guide number of 30. Let's use 30 because it's a easy number to work with. So your guide number is 30. That is in meters. So that's another thing. A lot of times you'll see guide numbers in meters, and sometimes they'll be using imperial units, feet. So you got to make sure that you don't mix up your units. So we're going to stay with meters. Guide number is 30. That's 30 meters. Your subject is 3 meters away from you. So make sure you're not mixing up the units and using feet here. So your subject, your model, is 3 meters away from you. Guide number is 30. All you have to do is divide 30, that's the guide number, by the number of feet away your subject is, 3, or not feet, see I made the mistake already. In this case, the number of meters your model is away from you. So that's 30 divided by 3, you get 10. That means you should set the aperture on your camera to f10 to get a properly exposed image. So that's how you use guide number to determine what aperture to use. So to tell you the truth, once you start doing this a while and you're using a flash in manual, it comes second nature. You don't really need a flash meter, and you don't really have to measure. You just kind of know. And even if you're using a softbox or an umbrella, you'll just know. And I guarantee once you do it a while, you'll get it within 2 shots. Your first shot might be off, and then you'll nail it with the second shot. So something to practice with. And if you really don't want to use a guide number, you don't want to use a manual flash, you want a TTL flash, Aperlite makes another model, the YH-400, that only costs $10 more, and you get TTL capabilities. Now, as of this recording, they only have it for Canon or Nikon, and you have to buy the right one for the kind of camera you have. And then on top of that, you have to just double check that it works with your model Canon or your model Nikon. It might not work with all models. It's only $10 more, so that's less than $60, and you have a really powerful TTL flash. Now, I mentioned that manual was one mode. It has 2 other modes, and I'm going to turn it back on a minute. And you can see right here there's a mode button, and we'll push that, and we're in manual mode. Then I'm in multi-mode. And multi-mode is something I would never ever use, but maybe you would. If you ever saw these images where you see kind of the study of an object through space, they probably used a flash on multi-mode, and you would use it in a totally probably pitch black room. You'd have your camera set up to a very long shutter speed, maybe 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Then with the multi-mode, you would go through this settings and you would set the number of times you want the flash to flash, and you want to set how long the distance is between flashes. That's the frequency. So you set the number of flashes and the frequency of flashes. Then let's say you're in this totally dark room, you have a table, you have a rubber ball, you would trip the shutter, the flash will start flashing at the same time you would bounce, let's say, this rubber ball off the table. You would end up with an image of the rubber ball moving through space, bouncing off the table and bouncing out of the frame. So that's what you would use the multi-mode for. Now, as you can see, it says SL. It will go into sleep mode to preserve the battery if you're not using it. And I just turn it off and on. Now, the next mode is S1. And there really is, this is S1 and S2. They're both the same thing, and that stands for slave mode 1. And if you look at the side of the camera right here, or the side of the flash right here, you can see there's a little infrared receiver. This will work as a slave. I could use my Nikon flash on my camera. I could have this off camera somewhere. And as long as the line of sight is clear from my Nikon flash to this infrared receiver, when I take the image, my Nikon flash will go off. This will sense my Nikon flash going off and fire itself immediately. Now, S1 mode is what you would use if you're using, let's say, 2 of these Aperlite flashes. One is the master, and this one would be the slave, let's say. Now, if you hit it again, you could see it says S2 mode. S2 is if you're using a TTL flash, such as this Nikon, and this is on camera. So it's in TTL mode. And what TTL mode, what flashes do, is they'll put out a pre-flash to measure the scene. And the camera, through the lens, will measure the scene, and it will tell the flash how much power to put out. Well, that pre-flash could fool this if you're in S1 mode, and it would flash too soon. If you're in S2 mode, it ignores that first flash, so it will fire at the proper time. So it's a really versatile flash. As again, you have manual mode, multi-mode, and S1, S2 mode. So it's really, I think, a great flash for less than $50. If you're a pro and you spent $500 and something on one of these and you don't want to buy another one, you need 2, 3 flashes, this could be your main flash. Buy a couple of these, run them as slaves. It'll work great, really well. If you're an enthusiast and you just have, other stuff that commands your money, like, a family, and you don't want to spend $500 on this guy, buy one of these, or spend $10 more and get the TTL version. I don't think you'll be disappointed. I was really pleasantly surprised about how good this flash is. So that's it, the Aperlite YH-400. If you guys have any questions, leave them below, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. Also, in the description below, I'll have links to both the YH-400 and the YH-500. That's the model with TTL. So you could look them over and check out their specs. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon.